Neptune society, while you tiger mindlessly with the ones we're wiring your rhyme and sing non-violently. Ha ha ha, we're laughing, silver lining is unwinding. We the people slowly finding they lying to us blindly. With the Neptune society, while you tiger mindlessly with the ones we're wiring your rhyme and sing non-violently.
Good evening, hello. I'm here today with Marcus Ruiz Evans. And he is he's one of the big thinkers behind a new movement going on called Yes, California. And it's about California claiming its independence. So Marcus, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for letting me be on, Kayla.
Yeah, totally. So, this idea of California claiming its independence from America, when did this begin? Where did this start? What was the birth of the idea?
Well, you can go back to Governor Schwarzenegger in the early 2000s, and he talked about how California was a nation. Recently, in the last couple of years, Governor Brown has said that California is a separate nation. That's two sitting California governors who said it's not just a state, it's really a nation if you think about it. I personally got involved with what's become Yes, California around 2011. I wrote a book, it was published, called California's Next Century 2.0. And that book looked at and tried to prove in hard data, census, newspaper clippings, hard information, that Californians are a separate culture than America, and that in fact the ability and the mechanisms to become independent, or at least recognized as a nation, is actually available for Californians. That book came out in 2011. Other people read the book, and a couple people and myself from the Bay Area, LA, Sacramento, Central Valley, the coast, San Diego, have joined together across California to form a movement called Yes, California. And really the whole goal of Yes, California and the movement is we as Californians should have this conversation. That California is more of a nation than a state, and that there are positive benefits to acting like a nation and being more independent. And in fact, we could take steps to do this, and that it is rational that we could do this. And so what we're trying to do, and the goal of Yes, California, is to get Californians to recognize that this is a rational conversation that's in their best interest to have and is productive. And everybody in California, or anybody who loves California, should be willing to talk about California is more of a nation. What does that mean? What are we missing out by not being independent? How could we become independent? And what are the ways that get involved in it? And if everyone in California has that conversation that California is more of a nation and that there's so much to gain, and then decides they don't want to do it, then fine. But Yes, California has traveled up and down California, Bay Area, Sacramento, Southern California, San Diego, the coast, the Central Valley here. And what we found is that less than 1% of Californians are aware of any of the facts. Not opinions, not hyperbole, not ideology, facts about how California is losing in the federal system, and the awesome potential and resources that are available if we became more independent. And we think, just have a discussion on the facts.
Right, so you guys want to take this topic and get it and bring it into the homes of Californians, right? So
Yes.
have it be a tabletop discussion.
Yes.
Something that, for example, another tabletop discussion where people in their homes are discussing these things, at dinner or when they're hanging out or whatever.
Yeah.
One of those examples is the California drought, right? That is a discussion, that's something that is very well known. It is talked about with everyone in California. Right? Everyone in California understands that we're in a drought. They understand the environmental circumstances, and they're discussing, how it affects them and potential solutions. So you guys want to bring that ideology, the California being a nation, to the table. You want that to be a conversation within the homes of Californians. So what are some of the ways that you guys are doing that right now actively?
Well, let's take the drought example. One of the things that we're trying to do is get into the media cycle. So California news, talks about certain issues, and they'll put it San Francisco Chronicle, LA Times, et cetera, San Jose Mercury, Sacramento Bee, et cetera, and they'll say, here's this issue in California like the drought. And they already tell Californians how they think about it. Every newspaper article kind of already paints, here's the bad guy, here's the good guy, here's how we got here, here's what you're supposed to do. And I'm not blaming anybody, that's just the way journalism works. People don't want to just hear about a problem, they want to hear how did it get there and what are we supposed to do or what's the impact. And what we're trying to do is sort of interrupt the media cycle. So when Californians talk about the drought, there's this other opinion inserted in there. Mom comes home, I want to talk about the drought. Well, Junior comes in and go, you know what, Mom? I heard something else not in the mainstream newspapers. And it's by a group called Yes California, and what they're saying on their website or press releases or meeting the public or passing out flyers or tabling at events around California. We have a tent, we've been traveling around California, the Yes California tent. Hey, when you have that conversation on the drought, talk about how the federal government is the problem behind the whole drought. Talk about why we don't have to have a drought. Talk about why, because the federal government has allowed bottled water companies to take water out of the forest, which they manage in the middle of a drought, that exacerbates the problem. Talk about how the federal government made the Delta smelt decision, and so they've cut off the amount of water that we even get from the Sierra National Forest. When you add that up, the Sierra National Forests are 60% of our water, and the feds are saying, go ahead, bottled water company, take water out of California in the middle of the drought. Let's protect this fish and cut off water for Californians and California farms. Let's not manage the forest in a way that releases so much water. Californians aren't aware of those different facts, and what we're trying to do is put them all together and then say when you look at it, and next time you have a discussion on the drought, discuss what is the federal government's role? How did they get there? Why is that going on? And so we're not trying to tell people what to talk about. What we're trying to do is say, you're already going to talk about this. Here's a new way of looking at it. And so when you have a dinner conversation with your family, your mom, your dad, your wife, your husband, your work friend, your buddy at college, high school students, teenagers to teenagers, anybody in California can get this. Talk about how the feds are responsible. Talk about how the feds screwed us over. Talk about why we're here because of mismanagement or intentional problems by the federal government. Another example, forest fires. Californians are already going to talk about forest fires. They know about that like they know about the drought. Federal government manages the forests, not Californians. Most of the forests are having huge forest fires because they're not managing it correctly. So when you have that dinner table conversation or that coffee chat, I love coffee and chatting. Huge Starbucks fan, not to do a corporate plug or anything. Talk about how the feds are behind the forest. Another issue, immigration. A lot of Californians have opinions on immigration. They're going to talk about immigration on their own. When you do, here's some extra facts by Yes California that you as a Californian should be aware. Who controls the border? The feds. Who controls the immigration system? The feds. California has a huge amount of undocumented people who are Californians, and here they're coming over the border illegally, or they're getting visas and they're overstaying their visas. In fact, overstayed visas are 50% of the visa immigration problem. That's because the feds aren't doing their job.
So let me ask you, when did the relationship between California and the federal government begin? I mean, how did that relationship kind of start out, and why has it not been addressed for this long, this amount of time? I mean, it's created so many different issues, and this isn't even a conversation yet. You know, you guys are you guys are pushing the boundaries, you know, opening up new doors on having this be a conversation. So, you know, explain a little bit of the history behind that.
The relationship between California and the federal government started when California was forced, not chose, to become a state. California didn't have the normal vote that people in a territory do to become a state. So right off the bat, things were not normal and not good. California was told by the feds, basically, you're going to become a state, and then they pumped a bunch of non-Californians in there and then said, see, you're a state, and we're done. And so right off the bat, you have people who weren't actually Californians determining how California is going to become the government unit that it is today. I would say that the real problem with California not being managed well, and that the awkwardness of the relationship between the federal government and California, as I call it, started around the 1970s. And simply the reason is money and the number of human souls. In the 1970s, California became the most populous part of the United States. In all 50 states, California beat out New York and became the most dense and most number of bodies of any part of America. Same time, 1970s, California becomes one of the top 10 global economies. The world economy is based on trade. The richest nations, right or wrong, good or bad, basically dictate terms to everybody else. The top 10 economies determine how the rest of the other 210 nations are going to operate. And in the 70s, California became one of that elite group. And it also became very populous. So in the 70s, it had the money and the people where it sort of became a nation. And we point to the 1970s because what that shows is that for close to 50 years, or at least 40 years, California's already been a nation. It was treated as a state, hasn't been going well. This isn't a new issue. It goes back at least to the mid-70s. We have too much money and too many people to be a subunit of the federal government. Before the 70s, we didn't have enough money and enough people for this to be as pressing an issue. But in the 70s, we just got too big. It's, imagine a house. Mom and dad lived there, and you got a little sister and a little brother. And then Jim Boy, you know, when he was a boy, it was okay. But then he's turning 17, 18. Now he's 35 years old, and he's still living at home with mom and dad. It's a little bit weird. It worked out when Jim Boy was 13. Now he's 35. That's just indecent and awkward. And the same relationship with California. It could live in this federal house for a long time when it was a small child. At some point, it became a full-grown man, adult, needs its own place, consumes more food, has to have its own job, etc. Just the demands of life required that it was time to move on. That was in the 70s. We're telling people, hey, 35, 40 years ago, maybe 45 years ago, you should have had this conversation. You didn't. Things have only become worse. Let's at least start now. We should have been talking about this when Governor Brown was governor for the first time. We didn't. That was a mistake. It's been nothing but bad for California. Let's stop the loss now and start the conversation now, although we should have done it in the 70s.
Wow. Wow. So we're really behind on the times.
Very behind, and it has been nothing but a loss.
Can you describe some of those losses? You know, I mean, in past discussions that I've had with you personally, you know, we've talked about this idea of, you know, war, and California saying, no, don't go to war. We do not support your war agenda, you know, for the larger America was in support of these wars, right? And there's multiple other examples. So could you give us some of those examples as to, you know, how we've been feeling these growing pains for a really long time and trying to voice that we want our own independence, we want a way to communicate our ideas and play them out on the world stage in a more successful way?
That's brilliant. That's perfect. The way you said it, perfect. Let's go back to the 1970s. And I know it seems like a history lesson. Sorry, but 70s was pivotal. America was getting out of the Vietnam War. California never liked the Vietnam War. Never thought it was a good idea. The hippie movement started in California. The anti-war movement started in California. The first violent protest, violent because the police attacked the protesters, was in Berkeley here in California. Kent State that everybody talks about, where an American was actually shot by the American National Guard protesting Vietnam, happened after California Governor Reagan, who became president, said, go ahead and have the National Guard basically attack the protesters. So it was here in California where the precedent of, we don't like this war and we're not okay with it and hell no, we're not going home, started here. That was the 70s. Let's fast forward to 2003, 2005. March 10th, 2005, I believe, my favorite day in history. On that day, California had a huge protest against the Iraq War. There was 3 protests in all 50 states where you had a couple 100,000 people or close to 100,000 or 1 million people. All the other protests were only like 5,000 or whatever. 2 of those big protests were in California alone. Only one was in all 49 other states had one in New York. California had 2. That was around 2003, 2005. So we were the epicenter of protesting the Vietnam. We were the epicenter of protesting the Iraq War. And on March 20th, I believe, 2003 or 2005, they actually shut down downtown San Francisco because Californians didn't want to go into the Iraq War. And what that did was shocked the global markets because San Francisco is the financial hub of California, and it's one of the top 10 financial hubs in the world. And so when Californians were protesting the war and they shut down San Francisco, you had stock markets in China going, what's going on? And I just point that out to show that we have the economic power, and when we protest things, the world feels it. And part of the reason that we protested the wars from America is we're diverse. We're full of Latinos and Asians and Arabs and Muslims, and there isn't any part of the world where we don't have a bunch of people here. So America says, let's go invade this section of the world. Well, right off the bat, there's a bunch of Californians who are from there and say, that's not a good idea. And then they talk to the rest of California, which is made up of hippies, who normally would never think war's the first option. It's the dead last, you've tried absolutely everything. Okay, and then maybe. And that's not how America does it. They go, we told them to do what we want, they didn't, bomb them right away, option number 2. Whereas for a California hippie, it's option 50. We're a bunch of hippies, we're a bunch of immigrants, we don't think war's a good idea, and then we have relatives from the place that's going to get blown up. That's why we're typically against this. But let's talk money. California is one of the top 10 economies in the world. We are because we trade with every nation in the world. We're the #1 source for people around the planet sending their students to go to school. We're the #1 source for businesses who want to invest in a product. It's called FDI, foreign direct investment. California is the #1 place in the entire world for anybody on the planet who wants to invest. On top of that, we have a bunch of immigrants from everywhere. Our economy is about 40% linked to international trade dependent. The average U.S. state in America overall is only 10%. We're ideologically against war. We're family and relationship against war. And we're business-wise against war because when you go invade a country and the rest of the world doesn't think it's a good idea, how the world did not agree with America on Vietnam, it did not agree with America on Iraq, that hurts trade. That hurts us Californians. That hurts jobs. That cuts down on the amount of investment. That cuts down on the amount of people who want to trade with us. Because they go, oh, you're an American state. You must have been okay with this war. No, we were totally against it. Doesn't matter. I'm not dealing business with you. So it is in our philosophical nature. It is in who we are, where we come from, and it is in our business interests. And I think we've basically gotten that since the 70s, because you can date the Vietnam War protests up till now. I mean, only a few years ago, we had these massive protests against the Iraq War.
Yeah, so that's a lot of different history, historical facts as to, no, it's awesome, because like you said, there's only 1% of Californians that actually know these numbers, right? That actually understand how deeply connected California is with the rest of the world. On a relationship base, our family members, people we know, people we love, and then that goes into the finances, how our economy is ran, and so many other deeply influential relationships and ties, right? So bringing it to now, with Yes California, who are some of the people that are involved? Who are some of the people that have heard these facts and really it's resonated with them, and who has gotten involved? Who are some of the names? Who are some of the people?
Couple stats right off the bat. On the Yes California Facebook page, we have about 6,500 Californians from around California. We're really spread out across the state. It's not like one region likes this more than the other. We worked hard for that, so we're very pleased that we're representative of northern and southern and central and conservative and liberal California. We get everybody. We have some hardcore liberals, we have some hardcore libertarians, and we have our own disputes, but everybody's basically on the same big idea. Then there's about 100 to 150 people who have agreed to volunteer, collect signatures, go out and try to do donations. And then there's the board, which is a collection of people they've just been around. They do everything, you know, they throw the trash, they file the nonprofit filings, they meet a legislator, they send a letter, they do whatever needs to be done. And we're really pleased because we've been able to collect a good amount of expertise. So there's a gentleman named Bart. Bart has been filing initiatives in California for 30 years. He knows all about the initiative process. He knows how to file initiatives. He knows how to get people to do initiative signatures. Yes, California has done about 6 or 7 initiatives. We used his expertise. There's another guy named Mike. Mike is a former lobbyist in Sacramento and DC and has helped argue in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. He's recently retired and he's helping us out with how to deal with the legislators and getting ideas for new policies in the news. There's Theo. Theo's a lawyer. He works in LA and Sacramento and he helps us out with some nonprofit work. And I'm the data person. I know the census data, I know all the data about the populations and the economics of California, and I've worked in that for about 10 years, a decade, and I spend most of my dealing with that. And then there's Lewis. You've met Lewis. He's the president. Lewis worked on a national campaign. It was for an issue across all 50 states, and he basically took that issue, which had maybe 2,000 people attached to it, and then he grew the Facebook community to 200,000+. So 200,000 plus people from around America joined this political movement because Lewis built it up. He got a tour bus, they traveled around, they got on the news. He has a lot of experience in building a political campaign and getting it out into the news cycle. And under his leadership, we've been very fortunate to make the International Business Times. The LA Times did a half-page article by a Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist. And we've had a few other columnists cover us, and we've basically been in the news throughout northern, southern, central, coastal, Sacramento, California, and TV in the Bay Area, radio, print, and online journalism.
Wow, wow. So, I mean, you guys have covered a lot of ground already. And
a lot more to cover, but yes.
yeah, I mean, there is a long way to go, but you can tell that, you know, there's been a lot of work, a lot of thought, a lot of action involved in this topic and this ideology, you know, of really bringing people to, you know, claim their identity or to reclaim their identity as Californians. And what does that mean? What does that mean to be a Californian on the global stage?
I'd say the biggest success that we've had has been recognizing amongst all of us that no one created this concept and that everybody who's joined and everybody's on the board basically thought of the idea that California is more of a nation and could be its own thing on their own. And they had thought about that for years. I can't tell you the number of times somebody came on to the board, somebody joined the movement, and the first thing out of their mouth was, wow, I had thought about this for years, and I thought I was crazy because I never met anybody else who did. And now there's an organization and there's people, and you're actually doing it. I thought I was the only one. The biggest success has been all of us recognizing that it's not just us. This isn't a concept that Yes California made. We're simply the first group of people to figure out, the best way I can put it is the time has come. The idea that California is a nation is out there. It's out there for anyone to see. It's gonna happen. Nothing can stop it. People are just starting, who are Californians, are just starting to wake up. And so the realization that the time has come, that this is now, that this will happen, that you could take away everybody in Yes, California, and it wouldn't stop this at all, it would keep moving. That realization has been the greatest success, and I say that because we've come to know that because person after person after person has just come on and said, I thought this too. And all of them said they figured it out in the last 4 years. Nobody said, I thought about this 15 years ago. It seems to be in the last 4 years, people just, oh yeah. And then only when we met each other did we realize it's real. It's real. We don't have to be here. All of us could be hit by a bus tomorrow. This is still happening. This awakening is happening. Californians are going to become aware. And knowing that was the greatest success because it gives us constant motivation. Whenever things don't go our way, whenever we didn't get that interview, whenever somebody says, should we just quit? The idea is quit what? You're either going to be on this when it happens or you're not. But this idea that it's not going to happen isn't true.